The year is 717 A. The most powerful empire on earth, the Umayyad Caliphate, has assembled the largest naval force in history. Over 1,800 warships blacken the waters of the Bosphorus, their hulls bristling with 120,000 warriors bent on one purpose: the complete destruction of Constantinople, the last bastion of the Roman Empire. Emperor Leo III stands on the seawalls, watching death approach from every horizon. His city is surrounded, cut off, starving. The greatest armies of Islam have already conquered everything from Spain to India. Now they've come for the crown jewel, the city that commands the gateway between Europe and Asia. But Leo possesses something his enemies don't know about. Something that will turn the tide in the most spectacular fashion imaginable. A weapon so terrifying, so impossible to defend against, that it will save the Byzantine Empire for another 700 years. They call it Greek fire. Picture this. You're an Arab naval commander in 717 A, leading the greatest armada ever assembled. Your ships stretch beyond the horizon. Victory is certain. Then suddenly, jets of liquid fire erupt from the Byzantine vessel's ahead fire that burns on water. Fire that cannot be extinguished. Fire that turns your mighty fleet into a floating crematorium. This isn't mythology. This isn't Hollywood. This is historical fact, documented by multiple sources from both sides of the conflict. The Byzantines possessed a weapon that modern science still cannot fully explain or recreate. Greek fire wasn't just another military innovation. It was the nuclear weapon of the medieval world, a technology so advanced, so devastating, that it remained unmatched for centuries. And here's the most incredible part. We still don't know exactly how it worked. The formula was one of history's most closely guarded state secrets. Only a handful of people knew the complete recipe, and they took that knowledge to their graves. When Constantinople finally fell in 1453, the secret died with the Byzantine Empire, lost forever in the chaos of conquest. But the evidence of its power remains burned into the pages of history. Contemporary chroniclers describe Greek fire with a mixture of awe and terror. The Byzantine historian Theophanes wrote that it flew like lightning and consumed everything in its path. Arab accounts speak of liquid flame that could not be quenched by any means, and ships that burned, even when submerged beneath the waves. These weren't exaggerations. Archaeological evidence from shipwrecks shows vessels with damage patterns consistent with intense, sustained fire that burned at temperatures exceeding anything achievable by conventional medieval weapons. Chemical analysis of residue found in Byzantine installations reveals compounds that shouldn't exist in 8th century warfare. The psychological impact was even more devastating than the physical destruction. Imagine being a sailor in the age of wooden ships, when fire was your greatest enemy. Now imagine facing an enemy who could project that fire across hundreds of yards of open water, creating flames that water couldn't extinguish, and that seemed to burn with supernatural fury. Arab chroniclers describe entire fleets abandoning attacks simply at the sight of the distinctive Greek fire, projectors being wheeled into position on Byzantine warships. The mere threat of the weapon was often enough to break sieges that had lasted months. But Greek fire wasn't just about naval warfare. The Byzantines developed multiple delivery systems, ship-mounted siphons that could project streams of fire up to 200 yards, handheld flamethrowers for close combat, incendiary grenades that could be hurled from catapults, and defensive installations that turned Constantinople's harbors into killing fields of liquid flame. The technology represented a quantum leap in military capability. While their enemies fought with swords, arrows, and conventional siege engines, the Byzantines wielded what amounted to chemical weapons centuries before the concept formally existed. The strategic implications were staggering. Greek fire didn't just win battles, it preserved an entire civilization. The Byzantine Empire, surrounded by enemies and outnumbered at every turn, survived for over 700 years largely because they possessed a weapon their enemies couldn't counter or replicate. Yet despite its crucial role in history, Greek fire remains one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. Modern chemists, military historians, and weapons experts have spent decades trying to reverse engineer the formula from historical descriptions and archaeological evidence. Their attempts have produced approximations, but nothing that matches the devastating effectiveness described in contemporary accounts. The closest modern parallel might be napalm, but even that comparison falls short. Greek fire burned hotter, stuck more tenaciously, and proved virtually impossible to extinguish using medieval methods. Some accounts suggest it even burned underwater, a property that defies conventional understanding of combustion. As we delve deeper into this mystery, we'll explore not just what Greek fire was, but how a single secret weapon shaped the course of European history, preserved Christian Byzantium against the expansion of Islam, and demonstrated the profound impact that technological superiority can have on the rise and fall of civilizations. The year is 673 AB. The Arab fleet, fresh from conquering the Holy Land in Egypt, advances on Constantinople with overwhelming confidence. The Umayyad Caliphate has swept across the known world in less than 50 years, toppling empires and reshaping the map from Spain to Persia. The Byzantine Empire, the last remnant of Rome, seems destined to join the list of conquered civilizations. Then something unprecedented happens. As the Arab warships close in for the kill, strange bronze tubes emerge from the Byzantine vessels. Suddenly, streams of liquid fire lance across the water, turning the sea itself into an inferno. Arab ships burst into flames and continue burning, even as they sink beneath the waves. This is the first recorded use of Greek fire in naval combat, and it marks a turning point in world history. The man credited with this revolutionary weapon is Kallinikos of Heliopolis, a Syrian architect and military engineer who fled to Constantinople when his hometown fell to Arab conquest. Kallinikos arrived at the imperial court, carrying knowledge that would prove more valuable than any treasure, the secret formula for liquid fire. But here's where the story becomes truly intriguing. Kallinikos didn't invent Greek fire from scratch. Ancient sources suggest he perfected a weapon that had much older origins, drawing on knowledge from across the Mediterranean world. Egyptian chemistry, Syrian engineering, and Byzantine innovation combined into something entirely new. The timing wasn't coincidental. The 7th century marked a period of existential crisis for the Byzantine Empire. The rise of Islam had cost them their richest provinces, Egypt, Syria, and the Holy Land. Their treasury was depleted, their armies defeated, their population demoralized. They needed a miracle weapon, and Kallinikos provided exactly that. The development of Greek fire represented more than individual genius. It was the product of a sophisticated research and development program that rivaled anything in the ancient world. The Byzantines established what amounted to the first military-industrial complex, with specialized workshops, testing facilities, and a network of engineers working to perfect chemical warfare techniques. Archaeological evidence suggests these workshops were located in the most secure areas of Constantinople, protected by multiple layers of security and operated by craftsmen who were essentially state prisoners, kept comfortable but never allowed to leave or communicate with outsiders. The level of secrecy surrounding Greek fire production exceeded that of modern nuclear weapons programs. The weapon's debut against the Arab fleet in 673 was spectacular beyond imagination. Contemporary accounts describe a naval battle that resembled scenes from hell itself. The Byzantine chronicler Theophanes wrote, "The fire flew like lightning and consumed the ships of the Arabs along with their crews. Those who jumped into the water continued burning even beneath the waves." Arab sources confirm the devastation from their perspective. The historian al-Tabari recorded, "We had never seen such fire before. It burned with a fury that seemed supernatural, and no amount of water could quench it. Many of our bravest warriors threw themselves into the sea to escape the flames, only to discover that the fire followed them beneath the surface. The battle wasn't just a military victory, it was a demonstration that shocked the medieval world. News of the liquid fire weapon spread rapidly across Europe and the Middle East, fundamentally altering strategic calculations from Cordoba to Baghdad. The success of Greek fire led to rapid technological development. Within decades, the Byzantines had created multiple variants: a thick, sticky version for ship-to-ship combat that could burn for hours, a lighter, more volatile mixture for long-range projection, and specialized formulations for different weather conditions and tactical situations. They also developed an entire ecosystem of supporting technology. The bronze siphons that projected Greek fire were marvels of engineering, featuring pressure chambers, ignition systems, and targeting mechanisms that represented the cutting edge of medieval technology. These devices were so sophisticated that fragments found by archaeologists are still studied by modern engineers seeking to understand their operating principles. The deployment system was equally advanced. Greek fire ships featured specialized crews trained in what amounted to early chemical warfare. These specialists wore protective equipment, understood safety protocols, and operated under command structures that anticipated modern hazardous materials handling procedures. But perhaps most remarkably, the Byzantines understood the psychological warfare potential of their new weapon. They deliberately cultivated an aura of supernatural terror around Greek fire, encouraging rumors that it was blessed by God or derived from unholy sources. This psychological component proved almost as effective as the physical destruction the weapon caused. The strategic impact was immediate and profound. The Great Arab Siege of Constantinople in 673 to 678 collapsed primarily because of Greek fire. The weapon broke the naval blockade that was starving the city, destroyed significant portions of the attacking fleet, and demoralized Arab forces to the point where they abandoned their conquest attempt. More importantly, Greek fire established a new paradigm in medieval warfare. For the first time in centuries, defenders possessed a significant technological advantage over attackers. This shifted the balance of power in favor of established empires like Byzantium and against the rapid expansion that had characterized early Islamic conquests. As news of the weapon spread, every major power in the medieval world began desperately trying to acquire or replicate Greek fire technology. Spies, bribes, and diplomatic marriages were all employed in attempts to penetrate the Byzantine secret. None succeeded. The formula remained locked away in Constantinople, protected by layers of security that would be impressive even by modern standards. This monopoly would prove crucial to Byzantine survival for the next 700 years, turning a single technological breakthrough into the foundation of imperial longevity. What made Greek fire so terrifyingly effective? To understand its impact, we need to examine exactly what this weapon could do that conventional fire could not. First, Greek fire burned on water. This wasn't simply floating oil. It could be dispersed. Contemporary accounts describe flames that continued burning even when ships were completely submerged. Medieval chroniclers reported seeing underwater fires that glowed like torches beneath the waves, a phenomenon that defied everything people knew about combustion. Modern fire requires oxygen to burn. Greek fire seemed to carry its own oxidizer, maintaining combustion in environments where normal flame would be instantly extinguished. This property alone made it devastatingly effective against naval targets, turning the sea itself into a potential weapon against enemy fleets. Second, Greek fire was adhesive. Unlike liquid petroleum or other flammable substances, Greek fire stuck to whatever it touched: ships, clothing, human skin. Victims couldn't simply jump overboard to escape. The burning substance followed them into the water and continued burning against their bodies. Medieval accounts describe warriors rolling in sand, diving beneath waves, even covering themselves in wet cloth, all without extinguishing the flames. This adhesive quality wasn't accidental. Chemical analysis of residue suggests Byzantine chemists deliberately engineered Greek fire to bond with organic materials, creating what modern military terminology would recognize as an early form of napalm. The weapon was designed not just to burn, but to burn persistently and spread to anything it contacted. Third, Greek fire burned exceptionally hot. Temperature analysis of damaged ship timbers shows evidence of fires that burned at over 1,000 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt bronze and copper, and far exceeding the temperature achievable by wood, oil, or other conventional medieval fuels. This intense heat made Greek fire effective against targets that would normally resist flame damage. Stone fortifications cracked under thermal stress. Metal weapons and armor became unusable. Even wet wood ignited and burned completely, leaving nothing but ash and twisted metal. Fourth, the weapon possessed remarkable range and accuracy. Contemporary accounts describe Greek fire projectors that could strike targets up to 200 yards away with precision. This gave Byzantine ships a significant tactical advantage, allowing them to destroy enemies before those enemies could close to conventional weapons range. The projection system itself was a marvel of medieval engineering. Bronze siphons mounted on ship prows featured pressure chambers that could launch streams of burning liquid across considerable distances. These weren't crude flamethrowers, but sophisticated weapon systems that required skilled operators and careful maintenance. Archaeological evidence reveals the complexity of Greek fire delivery systems. Excavated ship remains show mounting points for multiple siphons, suggesting coordinated fire from several projectors simultaneously. Pressure vessel fragments indicate systems capable of sustained fire for extended periods, not just single-shot weapons. The Byzantines also developed handheld versions for infantry combat. These personal flamethrowers allowed soldiers to clear fortifications, destroy siege engines, and create fire breaks during urban warfare. Military manuals describe tactical formations built around Greek fire troops, treating them as specialized units comparable to modern special forces. But perhaps most remarkably, Greek fire seemed to intensify rather than diminish when enemies attempted to extinguish it. Medieval sources report that throwing water on Greek fire made it burn more violently. Sand and earth proved similarly ineffective. Some accounts suggest that only wine, vinegar, or urine could successfully quench the flames, though even these methods weren't consistently reliable. This counterintuitive behavior terrorized medieval armies. Soldiers faced an enemy weapon that became more dangerous when they tried to fight it using conventional methods. The psychological impact was devastating, as warriors felt helpless against flames that seemed to possess supernatural properties. The Byzantines exploited this psychological warfare potential ruthlessly. They deliberately cultivated mystique around Greek fire, encouraging rumors that the weapon was blessed by God or derived from divine sources. Official propaganda claimed that the formula had been revealed by an angel, making it not just a military weapon, but a tool of divine providence. This religious dimension proved crucial to Byzantine identity. Greek fire became more than technology. It was evidence of God's favor toward the Christian Empire. When the weapon succeeded in battle, it validated Byzantine claims to divine protection. When enemies failed to replicate the formula, it demonstrated God's refusal to share holy secrets with infidels. Enemy attempts to counter Greek fire led to significant tactical innovations. Arab and other opponents developed new ship designs with improved fire suppression systems, changed naval formations to minimize damage from liquid fire attacks, and invested heavily in intelligence operations aimed at acquiring the secret formula. These countermeasures achieved limited success. While enemies learned to reduce casualties from Greek fire attacks, no one found effective ways to completely negate the weapon's advantages. The Byzantines maintained their technological edge for centuries, continuously improving the formula and delivery systems to stay ahead of enemy adaptations. Modern attempts to recreate Greek fire have produced various approximations, but none that fully match the capabilities described in historical sources. This suggests that the original formula contained components or utilized techniques that remain unknown to contemporary chemistry. The mystery deepens when we consider that medieval alchemists and engineers possessed sophisticated knowledge of combustible substances. The Byzantine Empire inherited chemical traditions from ancient Greece, Rome, and Egypt civilizations that had developed advanced metallurgy, medicine, and manufacturing processes. Greek fire represented the pinnacle of this accumulated knowledge, combining the best chemical engineering of the ancient world into a weapon that would not be surpassed until the modern era. It stands as evidence that medieval technology was far more advanced than commonly assumed, and that some ancient knowledge may have been lost rather than simply superseded by later developments. Constantinople in 717 AD was a city under sentence of death. Emperor Leo III faced impossible odds. His treasury was empty, his army outnumbered 10 to 1, his population starving behind walls that hadn't been tested against such overwhelming force. By every rational calculation, Constantinople should have fallen within months. Instead, the siege became the graveyard of Arab ambitions in Europe, broken by a weapon that turned the Bosphorus into a sea of fire. The Arab strategy was flawless in conception. Caliph Sulayman ibn Abi al-Malik had learned from previous failed sieges that Constantinople's great strength lay in its ability to receive supplies by sea. The Golden Horn provided a sheltered harbor where Byzantine ships could resupply the city indefinitely, making conventional siege tactics ineffective. Sulayman's solution was overwhelming force applied simultaneously from land and sea. His brother Maslama would command the land forces, creating an impenetrable blockade of the city's walls. Meanwhile, the greatest naval force in Islamic history would control the Bosphorus, cutting off all maritime supply routes and starving Constantinople into submission. The plan began perfectly. Arab armies swept across Anatolia, brushing aside Byzantine resistance and establishing siege lines around Constantinople's legendary triple walls. A naval force arrived on schedule, its 1,800 ships creating a wooden wall across the entrance to the Golden Horn. Leo III watched this deployment from the palace, knowing that conventional resistance would be futile. His only hope lay in the secret weapon that had saved his predecessors, Greek fire. But this siege would test the limits of even that miraculous technology. The first naval battle erupted when Arab ships attempted to force the chain that protected the Golden Horn S-entrance. As enemy vessels approached the harbor mouth, Byzantine ships emerged from concealment with their bronze siphons gleaming in the morning sun. What followed was unlike any naval battle in history. Jets of liquid fire lanced across the water, turning Arab warships into floating pyres. But this wasn't the limited engagement of earlier conflicts. This was industrial-scale warfare with chemical weapons, conducted on a scale that wouldn't be matched until the 20th century. Contemporary accounts describe scenes of apocalyptic destruction. The Arab chronicler al-Tabari wrote, "The fire of the Romans flew like lightning and consumed our ships faster than they could be counted. The sea itself seemed to burn, and many of our warriors threw themselves into the flames rather than face the dishonor of retreat." But the Arabs adapted with impressive speed. They developed new tactics, attacking in dense formations that overwhelmed Greek fire defenses through sheer numbers, using expendable ships filled with wet sand to absorb fire attacks while protecting valuable vessels behind them, and timing assaults during periods when weather conditions limited the effectiveness of fire projection. The siege settled into a deadly pattern. Arab forces maintained their blockade while continuously probing for weaknesses in the city's defenses. Byzantine defenders countered with increasingly sophisticated Greek fire deployments, turning every approach to the city into a potential killing field. The psychological warfare was as intense as the physical combat. Arab commanders offered massive rewards for any information about Greek fire's composition or production methods. Byzantine agents spread rumors about divine protection and supernatural properties of their weapon. Both sides understood that the siege would be won as much by morale as by military force. Winter brought new challenges. The Arab fleet, unprepared for the harsh weather of the Bosphorus, suffered enormous losses to storms and cold. Wooden ships burned through their supplies, while Byzantine defenders, supplied by runners through secret passages, maintained their resistance. Leo III exploited these difficulties with surgical precision. Greek fire ships launched night raids against anchored Arab vessels, turning winter storms into opportunities for devastating surprise attacks. The adhesive properties of Greek fire made these raids particularly effective. Burning ships could be extinguished by storm winds and rain. The turning point came in spring 718, when a massive Arab naval assault attempted to break the Golden Horn defenses once and for all. The attack involved coordinated strikes by over 400 warships, supported by land-based siege engines and assault troops. The Byzantine response was equally massive. Every available Greek fire projector was concentrated in the harbor, creating what Arab accounts describe as a wall of flame that reached from water to sky. The naval battle lasted 3 days, ending with the destruction of most of the attacking fleet and the collapse of Arab morale. But victory came at a cost. The intensive use of Greek fire had depleted Byzantine supplies of the weapon, leaving the city vulnerable to renewed attack. Leo III faced a terrible choice: conserve his remaining Greek fire for a final defensive battle, or use it to launch offensive operations that might break the siege permanently. He chose offense. In a series of coordinated strikes, Byzantine forces launched simultaneous attacks on Arab land and sea positions, using their remaining Greek fire to maximum psychological effect. The goal wasn't military destruction, but moral collapse. Convincing Arab forces that continued resistance to a divinely protected city was futile. The strategy worked perfectly. Arab chroniclers describe armies that simply melted away as soldiers abandoned their posts and returned home. The Great Siege collapsed not through military defeat, but through mass desertion as Islamic forces concluded that Allah had withdrawn his favor from the expedition. Maslama's retreat from Constantinople marked more than the failure of a single siege. It represented the high-water mark of early Islamic expansion. Never again would Muslim armies penetrate so deeply into European heartland. The survival of Constantinople preserved not just the Byzantine Empire, but the entire balance of power between Christianity and Islam. The strategic consequences rippled across the medieval world. The failure of the 717 to 718 siege convinced Islamic leaders that Constantinople was unconquerable, leading them to redirect expansion efforts toward Central Asia and North Africa. European powers gained confidence that Islamic expansion could be resisted, contributing to later crusading movements. But perhaps most importantly, the siege demonstrated the decisive importance of technological superiority in medieval warfare. Greek fire had proved capable of defeating overwhelming numerical advantage, superior strategy, and determined leadership. A single secret weapon had preserved an empire and altered the course of world history. The victory established Greek fire's reputation as an almost mythical weapon, feared throughout the medieval world and coveted by every major power. But as we'll see, this very success would eventually lead to the weapon's greatest challenges. By 800 A, Greek fire had become the most coveted military secret in the world. Every major power from Cordoba to Baghdad maintained networks of spies, diplomats, and merchants whose primary mission was penetrating the Byzantine monopoly on liquid fire technology. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Whoever cracked the Greek fire formula would possess the ultimate weapon of medieval warfare. The Abbasid Caliph Harun al-Rashid, the legendary ruler of the Arabian Nights, was obsessed with acquiring Greek fire technology. His court in Baghdad buzzed with alchemists, engineers, and intelligence operatives, all working toward a single goal: breaking the Byzantine secret that had frustrated Islamic expansion for over a century. Al-Rashid's approach was systematic and ruthless. He established what amounted to the medieval world's first industrial espionage program, with specialized units targeting different aspects of Greek fire production. Some agents posed as merchants seeking to trade with Constantinople's chemical workshops. Others infiltrated Byzantine military units as mercenaries or auxiliary troops. Still others worked to identify and bribe the craftsmen who actually produced the weapon. The security measures protecting Greek fire were equally sophisticated. Emperor Constantine V had reorganized the entire production system around what modern intelligence analysts would recognize as compartmentalized security. No single person outside the imperial family knew the complete formula. Different workshops handled different stages of production, with each group knowing only their specific role in the process. Workers in Greek fire facilities were essentially state prisoners, comfortable, well paid, but never allowed to leave Constantinople or communicate with outsiders without supervision. Their families received generous pensions, but lived under constant surveillance. The penalty for revealing Greek fire secrets wasn't just execution. It was the execution of entire family lines, ensuring that even genetic knowledge couldn't leak to enemies. Despite these precautions, fragments of information occasionally escaped. Arab alchemists analyzed residue from Greek fire attacks, identifying some components of the formula, but never achieving the precise proportions and preparation methods that made the weapon effective. European powers captured Byzantine equipment and personnel during various conflicts, gaining insights into delivery systems while remaining ignorant of the actual fire mixture. The most significant intelligence breakthrough came through an unexpected source: a Byzantine refugee named Kallinikos the Younger, descendant of the weapon's original inventor. Fleeing to Baghdad during a political purge in 820 AD, Kallinikos brought with him partial knowledge of Greek fire production, enough to create approximations, but not the complete weapon system. Working with Abbasid court alchemists, Kallinikos developed what Arab sources called naft, a flammable liquid that could be projected through siphons and cause significant fire damage. However, naft lacked the adhesive properties, underwater burning capability, and extreme temperatures that made Greek fire so devastating. It was recognizably similar to the Byzantine weapon, but critically inferior in performance. This near success led to an intensification of espionage efforts across the medieval world. The partially effective Arab fire weapon demonstrated that Greek fire could be approximated, encouraging other powers to invest heavily in their own research programs. Soon, alchemists from China to Spain were experimenting with combustible mixtures, each seeking the combination that would unlock Byzantine military superiority. The Venetians, with their extensive trade networks throughout the eastern Mediterranean, mounted perhaps the most sophisticated intelligence operation. Venetian merchants established relationships with Byzantine suppliers, gradually mapping the supply chains that supported Greek fire production. They identified sources of raw materials, transportation routes, and even some of the personnel involved in the weapons manufacture. Venetian espionage revealed that Greek fire required exotic ingredients imported from across the known world: sulfur from Sicily's volcanic regions, petroleum products from the Middle East, exotic resins from Egypt, and mysterious compounds that seemed to originate in India or even China. This global supply chain presented both vulnerabilities and opportunities for foreign intelligence services. The Rus, those Viking traders who controlled the river routes between Scandinavia and Constantinople, took a more direct approach. They attempted to capture Greek fire ships intact during naval raids, hoping to reverse engineer the weapon systems and analyze any remaining fuel. Several successful captures provided valuable intelligence about delivery mechanisms, but the Byzantines had developed sophisticated self-destruct systems that destroyed the actual fire mixture whenever ships were in danger of being taken. European powers pursued diplomatic approaches alongside espionage efforts. Marriage alliances, trade agreements, and military partnerships all served as cover for intelligence gathering. The Frankish Empire under Charlemagne offered massive payments for Greek fire technology, while the papal court quietly explored whether Christian solidarity might persuade the Byzantines to share their weapon with other Christian powers. All these efforts faced the same fundamental obstacle. The Byzantines understood perfectly well that Greek fire was their only significant military advantage. Sharing the technology would eliminate the weapon's effectiveness while creating new enemies equipped with Byzantine military secrets. No rational calculation supported revealing Greek fire to potential rivals. The psychological impact of these failed intelligence efforts was significant. The inability of major powers to penetrate Byzantine security enhanced Greek fire's reputation as a supernatural weapon. If the greatest alchemists and spies in the world couldn't crack the secret, perhaps it truly was divinely protected or derived from sources beyond human understanding. This mystique was carefully cultivated by Byzantine propaganda. Imperial chronicles emphasized the divine origins of Greek fire while describing gruesome fates for anyone who attempted to steal the secret. Official doctrine proclaimed that God would withdraw the weapon as power if it were ever revealed to enemies of the true faith. Religious elements complicated intelligence operations considerably. Christian agents often struggled with moral qualms about stealing from fellow Christians, while Muslim operatives faced theological questions about acquiring weapons that were supposedly blessed by an enemy deity. These religious concerns limited the pool of potential agents and created additional security advantages for the Byzantines. The most intriguing intelligence operation involved a mysterious figure known only as the Philosopher, apparently a former Byzantine Greek fire specialist, who offered to sell complete production secrets to the highest bidder. Multiple powers entered into negotiations with this individual, but the transactions always collapsed under suspicious circumstances. Some historians suggest the Philosopher was actually a Byzantine counterintelligence operation designed to waste enemy resources and identify foreign spy networks. Modern analysis of medieval documents suggests that no foreign power ever acquired complete Greek fire technology, though several developed partial capabilities. These approximations were often sufficient for limited tactical applications, but never approached the strategic impact of the original Byzantine weapon. The failure of these espionage efforts had profound consequences for medieval military development. Unable to replicate Greek fire, foreign powers were forced to develop alternative technologies and tactics. This drove innovation in siege engineering, naval architecture, and conventional weapon systems as medieval armies sought ways to counter Byzantine advantages without possessing Greek fire themselves. The intelligence war around Greek fire also established precedents for protecting and acquiring military secrets that would influence espionage practices for centuries. The systematic approach to industrial security developed by the Byzantines provided models for later efforts to control gunpowder, navigation techniques, and other crucial technologies. But perhaps most importantly, the hunt for Greek fire demonstrated the transformative power of technological secrets in an age when military advantages were typically temporary and easily copied. The Byzantine monopoly on liquid fire technology represented something new in human warfare, a sustained technological edge that could be maintained across centuries rather than mere years or decades. The year 1204 should have been the ultimate test of Greek fire's protective power. The Fourth Crusade had been diverted from its holy mission and now turned its terrifying focus on Constantinople itself. Western Europe's greatest warriors, veterans of campaigns against the Saracens, approached the Byzantine capital with siege engines, Greek fire knowledge acquired through decades of warfare, and an unshakable conviction that God favored their cause. But this time, the weapon that had saved Constantinople for 5 centuries would fail to protect its creators. The approaching Crusader fleet represented an unprecedented challenge to Byzantine naval supremacy. These weren't Arab raiders or Slavic pirates, but professional soldiers from societies that had been fighting against and alongside Greek fire for generations. They understood the weapon's capabilities, limitations, and tactical applications better than any previous enemy. More crucially, the Crusader fleet included Venetian ships equipped with their own fire weapons. Not true Greek fire, but approximations sophisticated enough to neutralize much of the Byzantine advantage. For the first time in centuries, Constantinople faced attackers who possessed comparable incendiary technology. Emperor Alexios IV watched from the palace as events unfolded with terrible inevitability. The city's Greek fire supplies were lower than ever before, depleted by decades of warfare against multiple enemies. The skilled craftsmen who maintained the weapon's production had been scattered by political upheavals. Even the security systems that protected the formula had been compromised by internal conflicts within the imperial court. The siege began with familiar patterns. Greek fire projectors emerged from the Golden Horn to confront the approaching fleet, launching streams of liquid flame across the water in displays that had terrified enemies for centuries. But this time, the attackers were prepared. Crusader ships approached in coordinated formations, designed to minimize fire damage. They used large shields coated with wet leather and clay to deflect Greek fire attacks. More importantly, they responded with their own incendiary weapons, Venetian fire ships, and primitive flamethrowers that, while inferior to Greek fire, were sufficient to disrupt Byzantine naval formations. The naval battle that followed marked the end of an era. For the first time, Greek fire failed to provide decisive advantage against a determined enemy. Crusader forces absorbed the punishment that had broken Arab fleets and pressed their attack home with methodical precision. Contemporary accounts describe the shock of Byzantine defenders as their ultimate weapon proved inadequate. The chronicler Nicetas Choniets wrote, "The fire that had protected us for centuries now seemed but ordinary flame, while our enemies advanced as if protected by divine shield. We began to understand that God's favor had departed from us." The psychological impact was devastating. Greek fire had been more than a weapon. It was the physical manifestation of Byzantine claims to divine protection and cultural superiority. When the weapon failed, it undermined fundamental assumptions about imperial legitimacy and God's favor toward the Eastern Roman Empire. But the failure wasn't just psychological. The practical military situation had changed dramatically since Greek fire's early triumphs. Medieval warfare had evolved in response to incendiary weapons, producing tactical innovations, defensive technologies, and strategic approaches that reduced the weapon's effectiveness. Ship design had improved significantly. Crusader vessels featured better fire suppression systems, more effective damage control procedures, and architectural modifications that limited the spread of incendiary damage. These weren't revolutionary changes, but incremental improvements that collectively reduced Greek fire's tactical impact. More importantly, the strategic context had shifted. Early Greek fire victories had succeeded partly because they demoralized attackers who had never encountered such weapons before. By 1204, Western European armies had centuries of experience fighting against and alongside incendiary weapons. They understood that Greek fire, while dangerous, could be countered through proper tactics and equipment. The Crusader assault on Constantinople succeeded through systematic application of conventional siege techniques rather than revolutionary innovations. They built siege engines that could breach the city's walls, developed naval tactics that neutralized Greek fire advantages, and maintained logistical systems that sustained the attack despite Byzantine resistance. When the city finally fell on April 13, 1204, the conquering Crusaders discovered that the legendary Greek fire workshops were far less impressive than rumored. The secret formula, pursued by spies and alchemists for centuries, proved to be based on readily available materials combined through relatively simple processes. The devastating effectiveness of Greek fire hadn't been due to exotic ingredients or supernatural properties, but to careful refinement of basic chemistry, combined with superior delivery systems and tactical applications. The weapon's power had always been as much psychological as physical, depending on enemy fear and confusion as much as actual destructive capability. Venetian merchants, who had participated in the crusade partly to acquire Greek fire technology, found themselves somewhat disappointed by their prize. The formula they had coveted for generations was certainly valuable, but not the revolutionary breakthrough they had expected. More importantly, the weapon's effectiveness depended heavily on manufacturing skills, tactical knowledge, and strategic applications that couldn't be easily transferred to new users. The fall of Constantinople scattered Greek fire knowledge across Europe as Byzantine craftsmen fled to various courts seeking employment. However, this diaspora didn't lead to widespread adoption of the technology. Most European powers found that Greek fire required specialized infrastructure, trained personnel, and tactical approaches that were difficult to integrate into existing military systems. More significantly, warfare was beginning to change in ways that reduced the strategic value of incendiary weapons. The development of improved armor, better siege engines, and more effective fortifications was shifting military balance toward conventional arms. The age of Greek fire was ending just as its secrets were finally being revealed. The Latin Empire that replaced Byzantine rule in Constantinople made limited use of Greek fire technology. The Western Europeans who now controlled the weapon lacked both the maritime focus and the desperate strategic situation that had made the weapon so crucial to Byzantine survival. For them, Greek fire was simply one military option among many, rather than the foundation of imperial defense strategy. The irony was profound. After centuries of protecting the secret that preserved their empire, the Byzantines lost that empire just as the secret was becoming militarily obsolete. Greek fire had outlived its strategic usefulness, becoming a historical curiosity rather than a decisive weapon of war. Yet even as Constantinople burned under Crusader occupation, remnants of the Byzantine Empire survived in exile, carrying with them not just Greek fire technology, but the institutional knowledge necessary to produce and deploy the weapon effectively. These successor states would face their own challenges in the centuries to come, as new enemies and changing military technologies continued to erode the advantages that liquid fire had once provided. The fall of Constantinople to the Fourth Crusade marked more than the temporary collapse of the Byzantine Empire. It represented the end of Greek fire's dominance in medieval warfare and the beginning of a new era in military technology. The secret weapon that had shaped history for over 500 years was finally passing into history itself. When Mehmed II's massive cannons finally breached the walls of Constantinople on May 29, 1453, they were destroying more than just stone and mortar. The fall of the last Byzantine stronghold marked the end of Greek fire as thousand-year reign as history's most closely guarded military secret. In the chaos of that final siege, as Turkish soldiers poured through the breached walls of Constantinople, the last masters of Greek fire made a desperate decision. Rather than allow their ancient secrets to fall into Ottoman hands, they destroyed the remaining workshops, burned the formula archives, and took their knowledge to watery graves in the Golden Horn. The weapon that had defended Christianity's eastern frontier for 8 centuries died, with the empire it had protected. But Greek fire's influence extended far beyond its military applications. The technology had fundamentally altered the trajectory of world history, shaping the balance between East and West, Christianity and Islam, land power and sea power in ways that continue to resonate today. Consider the counterfactual. What if Greek fire had never existed? Without this technological advantage, Constantinople would likely have fallen during the great Arab sieges of the 7th and 8th centuries. The Byzantine Empire would have collapsed a millennium earlier than it actually did, fundamentally altering the development of European civilization. The survival of Byzantium preserved crucial links to classical antiquity that might otherwise have been lost. Byzantine scholars maintained Greek philosophical texts, Roman legal traditions, and early Christian theological works that formed the foundation of later Renaissance humanism. The libraries of Constantinople served as repositories of ancient knowledge that survived the European Dark Ages precisely because Greek fire kept the city unconquered. More immediately, Byzantine resistance channeled Islamic expansion toward different targets. The failure of early Arab sieges against Constantinople convinced Muslim leaders that Europe's eastern approaches were too strongly defended to justify continued assault. Islamic expansion shifted toward Central Asia, North Africa, and Iberia directions that proved far more successful, but also less strategically threatening to European heartland. This redirection of Islamic expansion had profound consequences for medieval development. The Crusades, launched partly in response to Byzantine requests for assistance against Turkish pressure, might never have occurred if Constantinople had fallen centuries earlier. The complex relationship between Eastern and Western Christianity, marked by both cooperation and conflict, shaped European identity in ways that continue to influence modern geopolitics. Greek fire also established important precedents for military technology development and control. The Byzantine approach to protecting weapons secrets, compartmentalized production, strict personnel security, and systematic counterintelligence provided models for later efforts to control gunpowder, navigation techniques, and other strategic technologies. The weapon demonstrated that technological advantages could be maintained across centuries rather than mere decades, but only through sustained institutional commitment to research, development, and security. This lesson proved crucial as European powers began developing their own advanced military technologies during the late medieval and early modern periods. Perhaps most significantly, Greek fire represented one of history's first examples of chemical warfare, the deliberate use of synthesized substances to create battlefield effects impossible through conventional weapons. The psychological impact of facing weapons that seemed to violate natural laws provided insights into the power of technological surprise that would prove relevant throughout subsequent military development. Modern military analysts study Greek fire not just as historical curiosity, but as an early example of asymmetric warfare, how technologically superior but numerically inferior forces can achieve strategic success against larger enemies. The Byzantine experience with Greek fire provided models for using technological advantages to compensate for demographic and economic weaknesses. The weapon's eventual obsolescence also offers important lessons about the temporary nature of military advantages. Greek fire dominated medieval warfare for centuries, but changes in ship design, tactical doctrine, and strategic priorities gradually eroded its effectiveness. No technological advantage, however significant, remains decisive indefinitely. Contemporary attempts to recreate Greek fire have achieved mixed results. Modern chemists can produce substances that approximate some of the weapon's properties: adhesive burning, resistance to water extinguishing, projection through siphon systems, but none that fully match the capabilities described in historical sources. This partial success suggests that Greek fire's effectiveness may have depended as much on tactical application and psychological impact as on chemical composition. The weapon's power lay not just in its physical properties, but in its integration with Byzantine naval doctrine, strategic planning, and diplomatic positioning. Recent archaeological discoveries continue to shed light on Greek fire technology. Chemical analysis of residues found in Byzantine installations has identified several components of the formula, including sulfur compounds, petroleum derivatives, and various organic additives. However, the precise proportions and preparation methods remain unknown. More intriguingly, some evidence suggests that different Greek fire formulations were developed for specific tactical situations, lighter mixtures for long-range projection, heavier compounds for ship-to-ship combat, specialized variants for siege defense. This technological sophistication indicates that Greek fire represented not a single invention, but an entire family of related weapon systems. The legacy of Greek fire extends beyond military history into the realm of technological innovation and knowledge transfer. The weapon represented one of the most successful examples of technology protection in pre-modern history, demonstrating how strategic advantages could be maintained through systematic security rather than temporary secrecy. Yet ultimately, Greek fire's story is one of impermanence. The weapon that seemed invincible eventually succumbed to changing military requirements, evolving tactical doctrines, and the natural tendency of technological advantages to diffuse across competing powers. The secret that protected an empire for 8 centuries finally died with that empire, leaving behind only fragmentary records and enduring mysteries. Today, as we face our own challenges with emerging military technologies, cyber warfare, artificial intelligence, directed energy weapons, the story of Greek fire offers both inspiration and caution. Technological advantages can indeed alter the balance of power and preserve civilizations against overwhelming odds. But such advantages require constant innovation, sustained investment, and adaptive application to remain effective across changing strategic environments. The bronze siphons that once projected liquid fire across the waters of the Golden Horn now rest silent in museum displays, their secrets lost to time. But the legacy of Greek fire, the demonstration that human ingenuity, properly protected and strategically applied, can overcome seemingly impossible odds, continues to inspire and instruct those who face their own existential challenges in an uncertain world. In the end, Greek fire reminds us that the most powerful weapons are often those that exist, not just in the physical realm, but in the human imagination. Technologies so advanced, so unexpected, so perfectly suited to their strategic environment that they transcend mere military application to become symbols of civilizational resilience and human creative potential.